You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello, my name is Chris, and you are watching the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Yes, I did forget to put that screen on. I apologize. Hello, writers, book lovers, and anyone in the creative space. Thank you for tuning in. And in fact, anyone who's watching this or listening back on the podcast, I thank you for doing so, and I hope you're well. It's obviously been a very busy week, and we've got a very busy week for the WCCS from tonight onwards, because tomorrow evening there's a special show, a bonus show from the show. The Brooklyn Book Festival is back, and for the second year running, the WCCS has teamed up with QI Queer Indie, and we are hitting the Brooklyn Book Festival virtual show at 7 p.m. tomorrow evening, which is 2 EDT, so you can tune in and join us then. If it's socially acceptable, bring a drink, why not? And if you don't know, the QI Queer Indie Group are an amazing bunch of authors who have created this fantastic website and database of LGBTQ authors and their allies, so people like myself who support their kind of group have all been listed on this incredible website, which you can check out. And a lot of those people have been on this show before. You will recognize their faces. So tomorrow we will be talking all about writing, literary taboo, killing off your characters, and writing in general, and just a bit of life as well, of course. And it's going to be a bit of a laugh. So guys, please tune in and support that if you can. And tonight's guest is going to be fantastic as well. Something we can get our teeth into, not literally, of course. But yeah, very busy. Great to see you in the chat already. Thank you for doing so, and I hope you are well. So let me know what's been going on in the chat, what your week's been up to, and I will get our guest introduced just very shortly. First of all, hello to you in the chat. Hello, Anya. Nice to see you there. Brandon is in. Hello to you. And we've got a few others there chatting, so thank you very much. I will get on with tonight's guest, and we can get chatting. Please, if you have got questions, stick them in the chat, and of course towards the end there will be dedicated section for those questions, so save them up if you want to, but if you've got a few, why not send them in? So ladies and gentlemen, tonight's guest is a New York Times best-selling author of books about butt-kicking ladies, which is on her Twitter page, which I really like that statement, so it's in there. She is the author of over a dozen middle-aged and YA novels, which is really cool, and she is here introducing her latest book, which is her first adult book, which is really cool to see that there's a transition in there, and we will surely talk all about that. Her book, The Change, is a Good Morning America book pick for the month of May, and Marion Keyes described it as a roar of rage, a pacey turner, and she said she loved it with all her broken heart, and read it, you'll love it, is what she said. So ladies and gentlemen, we will talk all about that with our guest, Kirsten Miller. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for joining me. We had a great little chat before you came on, and it's really exciting to have you on here. And as I mentioned, there's lots of different things for us to talk about with your kind of book transitions. But first of all, how is Kirsten? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the weather. It's I was saying to you just a minute ago that September and October are the most beautiful months in New York. So I like to, I'm a walker, so I like to go out and just walk and walk and walk. And this is the best time of the year to do that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've done a lot of walking lately with I got an event in just 2 weeks, so there's been lots of walking, and the weather's been fantastic for that. And it's nice now. It's starting to cool down a little bit. It's getting a little crisp, and I think it's kind of a romantic season, is the autumn times, especially for us writers.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Brilliant. So you yourself are coming from New York right now, which is the Brooklyn Book Festival, is what we were just talking about, and that is something that you've been part of before. Yes,
it is, and I live less than I would say probably half a mile from the side of the Brooklyn Book Festival, and it's wonderful. I mean, it really is. It's you would not. I mean, the lineup of authors that they have every year is just amazing. It's anyone and everyone that you've ever heard of. So there are a lot of great book festivals in this country, but I think Brooklyn is probably, I don't know. I guess it's maybe I live here. Maybe I'm a little partial, but I think it's the best.
That's amazing. I mean, does it really? Do you feel something like that in the community? Does it reflect at all?
Literally everybody in publishing lives in Brooklyn.
Wow.
I used to live basically right next door to my current editor. I live within a couple of blocks of my previous editor. We're all here, all the writers and the publishers. And
that must be amazing in like a writer's sense as well. The fact that you can actually interact with these people and almost, I guess it would be encouraging just to be in that space where you feel like there's like-minded people around, you know, because a lot of the time for an author, I feel it might be quite isolating, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you can bounce off people there?
Yeah, I mean, it's well, I mean, first of all, it's really great for networking. And it's also really great for going out to drinks with your editors.
Of course, yeah.
And for knowing other writers. I don't do a lot of socializing these days because nobody does anymore. I mean, hopefully that'll kick in, at some point in the near future. But, in the past, it was very, very easy to go to drinks nights with, half of the YA authors you've ever heard of. So it was great. And, I mean, it's wonderful. It's also, it can be a little intimidating as well. There are a lot of really big names in the community. And
do you know what? I guess that's the downside of having that network very close, because yes, it's amazing to go and socialize in the right way with these people and interact and build that relationship. But you've got to be careful that you don't do the opposite at the same time.
Yes. And it's also, I'm a medium-sized fish in a very, very large pond. So, there's also that sense. I mean, there are some, I mean, the greats live here. So it's humbling.
I bet. So what we're going to do at the very start of the show, as always, is kind of have a look into your past, if that's fine, in terms of writing sense and perhaps some stories along the way. So we're going to play the very first video, which is part 1 of the show, The Road to Writing. So then, Kirsten, could you let us know a little bit about then where your journey started as a writer, kind of where your inspirations came from?
So I always wrote. I always wrote stories. Even as a kid, I was writing all the time, but I never for a second thought that I would do it for a living or that anybody would give me any money to do it. It was just sort of, I have a very, I have sort of eccentric tastes. So I would write to indulge those tastes, and I knew they weren't necessarily everyone's. And after college, I needed to eat. I didn't have a trust fund. So I got a job in advertising because it was one of the few industries where somebody with my kind of degree could get a job and make enough money to buy beans and bagels to eat. Publishing does not pay very well at all in New York. And so I was in advertising for a long time, and I loved it. And I started writing a little, I don't know, I thought of it as a story at first and didn't know what it was going to be, but it was something that I was writing strictly for myself. And it turned out to be my first book, which was called Kiki Strike. And it's about 6 delinquent Girl Scouts who discover an underground city beneath Manhattan.
Wow.
And it's pretty wild. And I was just doing it for fun. And I happened to mention it to somebody that I worked with. And big shout out to Chris Upton. And his boyfriend worked in a publishing house and that dealt in young adult books. And he said, well, if you're really nice, maybe I'll show it to him. And he ended up passing the book to his boyfriend, and the boyfriend loved it. And that, it ended up working like that, which that's absolutely unheard of. Every author on the planet would, would die for such an easy experience, because most of the time it's rejection after rejection. But for this, the universe was smiling on me. And so that's how I got my first book published. And I just kept going after that. And I wrote a lot of young adult books. Spent a lot of time writing with the actor Jason Segel, who's wonderful. And now I'm here in the adult world.
Well, you surely can't leave that clanger in there and stop at that point, but we'll get back to that. So going back a little bit, which is amazing. That story is incredible, by the way. It really is. Like what you said about the contrast between the typical journey of the what's the word, procrastination, is it, and throwing your book at agents and hoping for something to stick, and that battle, which we have had someone on the show before that had a similar experience where their book was just seen in a kind of a what's the word, an anthology. So their book was picked up off the back of that. But this is really unique. And for the fact that you were writing because you loved it, I think is a really cool thing to do in the first place. Because if you love that story, someone else is bound to. But going back, how did your career in publishing in advertising, did that have any influence into how you kind of do your trade now, or do you use the experiences there for your writing career at all?
Well, I'll tell you, the one thing that it gave me, which is incredibly important, is a very, very thick skin. Anyone going into this business, you are going to, it doesn't matter how great you are, it doesn't matter how successful you are going to have people come after you. And then there are going to be people who love you, and it's going to be the opposite ends of the spectrum. And you have to learn how to live with that. You have to learn how to take the 1-star reviews. And that, I remember one of my early books, some guy on Goodreads said that if he was like, I would like to punch this book in the face. And I think that was the point where I just started laughing, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, how can I get upset about that? This is some guy with his opinion about a book for 12-year-old girls. Like, why? Like, I can't get upset about that.
That's a really good point in the first place. I've actually got, I always contrast some reviews on the show, so don't stress that I'm going to show people a low standard review of The Change. But the reason I picked it out was because it's a ridiculous review, and people stay tuned to watch that in a little while, because when we get to that, don't ever do that ever. It's ridiculous to what that review is about, but then I've got a fantastic review to follow it. But Goodreads, I think, is notoriously a dark place, right?
I would recommend every author that I know goes there. Okay. And every author, and it's usually after a couple of beers, when they work up the courage, they're like, oh, let's look at our Goodreads reviews. But it's a very, very scary place for authors. I don't necessarily recommend it for authors. It's a wonderful place for people who read books, who want to keep track of what they've read, who want to share their thoughts with other readers. It's not a great place for writers. And I would heartily recommend that you stay away from it unless you have, enough liquid courage in you to take the 1 stars.
Halo in the chat says, yes, Goodreads, drunk scrolling, smiley face.
Now you know how I spend my weekend.
So if we can just think about then these lovely stories that you were writing for kind of self-enjoyment, was there a learned process before that point, or was the fact that you were writing since you were young just naturally developing into a talent at that point?
Yeah, I think that I had done so much of it, and I had done so much of it that I never showed anyone. I presume I was getting better at it as I went along. I would hate to dig out some of those old stories and have a look at them now. But it was really just something that I felt like I wanted to do. It was a passion, and I think that passion is the most important thing when it comes to writing. Because writing is really, really hard. It is not easy for anyone. There is no one I've ever spoken to who says, oh, it's so easy for me. It's not. It's really, it can be very painful at times. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, there's no point.
Definitely. I really, really appreciate and agree with that comment. When you spoke about how you've got those stories, are they still actually kicking around somewhere, or have you seen them recently?
So when my parents passed away, ended up with several boxes of old school materials. And there was one actually I found that was pretty good.
Yes.
From, like the 6th grade or something like that. And, I think, it was clearly the work of somebody who liked what they were doing and felt very confident in themselves. And I really owe that to the teacher. That I had one language arts teacher from 4th through 8th grade, and she really helped make me into the writer that I became. She also showed me a great, I really do owe her an enormous amount for her support over those years.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that the right kind of person in the right space can really make all that difference to a young person. So I'm always fascinated by the idea of someone having older stories kicking around and being sat there wondering what their next idea can be, and then suddenly looking back and finding this gem. I'm sure it must happen.
I don't think that's going to happen with me.
No, you never know.
I don't think there are any gems in there, but I would be very happy if there were, for sure.
Fantastic. So you did mention in there Jason Segel.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to elaborate on that, surely.
Oh yeah, so I God, I don't know. It was a long time ago. He had a screenplay that he had written that was it was called Nightmares. It was for kids. And Hollywood's one of those places where people will buy, option your script just to hold on to it and not do anything with it. And so he had gotten kind of, I think, a little bit screwed over by a few people. And he had finally gotten it back, and he had the script and he wanted to do something with it. And he decided that he wanted to turn it into a book. And so he went to William Morris Endeavor, which is, we're both represented by them, and wanted to find somebody to collaborate with him, somebody who had a track record of, turning out pretty good middle grade books. And I met him, and we really hit it off. And that was kind of the beginning of a very, very long relationship. We ended up writing 7 books together.
Wow.
So yeah, and it was a lot of fun. He's we share a very similar sense of humor, which is sort of as one of our editors said, sometimes you can't put too many poop jokes in a book. No, you can't have too many poop jokes.
But why
so
not?
That was great.
So did you find any kind of good benefits to writing with someone, or were there kind of negatives to go along with it? How did you find that process?
I think that I enjoyed the process because it was with him, and because he and I got along very well. I don't know if I would play quite as well with other people. I'm not a natural collaborator. I'm very bossy, but our talents kind of complemented each other in the sense that I'm really good at sort of building worlds and all of that. What he described as kind of being the director of the book. And
Nice.
sorry for the shafts of sunlight, but and he's very good at dialogue and also those little tiny details that you need in every book to really make it come alive. So we worked really well together. I would sort of set the scene, and he would bring the characters to life, and add those precious little jokes, those little details, those little weird little things that you want in a book that makes it feel really special and unique.
Amazing. Is there someone out there that you want to collaborate with then? Is there someone you'd really think that would be a great kind of duet of writers?
No, not if I think I'm done with collaboration. I think it was a wonderful experience, but I feel like I've gotten on a path now that I want to follow for quite some time. And it really is very, very intensely personal, and it comes from my view of the world, which I want to share with other people.
Amazing. So once you had sent your books off, or they'd been passed along almost, and you had that kind of connection with your publisher then, or your agent, or whatever that kind of developed into, did you kind of feel any pressures at that point then? Because you've been writing so freely up to that point. Did you suddenly feel the pressure to perform at that point?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
somebody was giving me money to do it, and suddenly
Yeah.
suddenly things became very, very serious, and I had to actually finish it. I
Mm.
think that's the trick. There are a lot of people with talent out there. There are a lot of people who have a lot more talent than I do, but I think the one thing that is in very short supply is just the discipline to be able to finish a project of the magnitude that a book is. I mean, a book is just this massive, massive endeavor, and there are many people, including myself, who have books that they've started and set aside for one reason or another. And so I was in a position where I had sold the books. I'd actually sold a trilogy, and then you have to write them. And I was working full time.
Mm.
So just managing the time was probably the most difficult thing of all. Just making sure that, because I was getting up in the mornings and writing on the weekends, and just finding a way to do that without completely burning out is quite a challenge.
Definitely. That is one of the hardest things that a lot of people ask about when it comes to sort of writing tips, is how do you manage the time, especially workers, parents, all these kind of people that have a life to then take up something like this. But so many people have just said you've just got to find time, and there is time to find, but you just don't realize it until you make that time. But do you have any tips for someone then who might be a prolific starter, not finisher?
I think I have a lot of, so there are two tips that I have, and one is regarding like finding the time.
Mm.
So I didn't know that I was a morning person until I was, probably in my late 30s. And I discovered that I'm just really good at getting up in the morning, and those are my most efficient hours. If I get started at 6:30, then I can get all sorts of stuff done. And for other people, it's in the evening or at lunchtime. And it's really important that you find out when your most productive hours are going to be. I think everybody has a time period that their brain just works best in. So I would look for that. The other thing is just realize that you are not taking dictation from God, that sometimes you're just going to have to sit and wait for the muse to arrive.
Mm.
And that can take a while. So there's a lot of, I would say there's just as much sitting involved in writing a book as there is actually typing. And some of that sitting is going to be you staring at the computer, very, very unhappy about the lack of progress. But that's an important part of the process. You have to go through that.
Definitely. I think we've all been through that as people who are writing. That blank screen at some stage, whether it's at the start of the story, halfway through, at the end. And like you said, waiting for the sort of motivation to come back. It's just a natural process, and it does come back.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do ask that question. How do you get that kind of mojo back? But I don't think it's writer's block, as they say. I think it's just a matter your mind is just, it needs a break.
No, it does. And I mean, it's your brain is actually working very, very hard during these periods. It's just doing stuff other than, composing sentences and paragraphs. So let it do what it needs to do, and it will end. I promise you.
It will be over.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to wait it out.
Yeah, I do find that if I get to that stage, what really helps me is kind of exercise, whether going for a run or for a walk, as we talked about earlier. Just kind of, it just gets energy into you in a different way, and I think that's really important. And if you're sat there at the computer for so long, it kind of turns into the opposite. You kind of get suppressed in your mindset. So just leave it, forget your story, go out, and your mind will go back to it naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the function that walking serves for me. It's just sometimes I'll put an idea, if I'm working on something and it's not coming out the way that I want it to, I will often plant an idea or the seed of an idea in my head, and then just leave it there and go for a walk and do nothing else. I won't think about it. I won't, it'll just be me walking. And somehow by the time I get home, often the answer is solved. I mean, I'll have the solution. And it's a neurological trick. It actually works very, very well because your brain is still thinking about it, even if it's not consciously processing.
Definitely. Certainly worth a try. So when you had those books kind of going in that direction and the ball was rolling, it was actually a job as opposed to kind of your passion at the time. What were the next steps you were? Because of course you wrote a trilogy there, and you're stepping now into the world of adult books.
Yeah.
So why was there? Why do you feel that there's been that transition?
Why did I transition from young adult books to adult books?
Mm-hmm.
I think I just, I got to the point where the thing that I was passionate about, the message that I wanted to get across was one for people my age. I had started out, my first book series was really, I'd always thought of it as a story that I was telling to my 12-year-old self. And a story that I thought would have really helped me at that age to sort of get through the trials and tribulations of adolescence and come out, being the little, badass that I wanted to be. And so I wrote that for my 12-year-old self. And then suddenly I had this story that I was equally passionate about, but it wasn't a story for kids. It was one for women and like-minded men of my own age. And so I sat down and wrote it. And it's funny because the worlds are so separate that in the adult world, this is considered my debut novel. even though I've written like 15 books, this is my debut novel. So
yeah, I always find that fascinating from a research perspective, because I get a guest that's coming on, I'll go on the internet, the first thing I'll do is check out the website or something like that, or on Amazon, and it'll be debut novel. Oh, cool. Okay, check out the rest of the backlog, and it's like, how is that a debut novel?
Yeah.
But it is generally when there's a genre change or kind of a change in sort of style there. But yeah, it's fascinating. But we'll get onto that very shortly. And definitely want to talk about the covers that are behind you, because you've got two different ones there. But we will leave that for the next part of the show. So what do you feel of your young adult books, your time writing those? Did you feel like there was a time whilst you were writing those books that there was a change in your process, or kind of a time where you learned something really kind of different to how you kind of normally wrote?
Yes, I learned that I have to have an outline.
Okay.
I wrote my first book without an outline. I just winged it. And I thought, I'm a genius. I can do this. And guess what? I wasn't. And so I learned very, very quickly that if you're good, because I love plot-driven books. Like, I just love a good twisty, turny, exciting thriller, whether it's for kids or for adults. And if you're going to write those, you absolutely have to have an outline, because it's really difficult to get lost in a 300-page book. Really, it doesn't matter how intelligent you think you are, like, you're going to get lost in it, and it is going to be terrifying when that happens. So I mean, here's the trick, because you want to write an outline that will essentially hold your hand from start to finish, but you also need to have enough room to maneuver so that you can go off on little tangents if you want to. So that, you can introduce new characters if somebody pops into your head that you really want to talk to, have in the book. So you have to, whatever, everybody's different, but for me, I have to have that outline, but I also have to be able to break away from it when I feel some sort of creative inspiration. So I will often rewrite the outlines. I just rewrote the outline of a book that I'm working on now. And it's my least favorite part of the process. I absolutely hate writing outlines, but they are essential.
So it's leaving a bit of wiggle room for adjustment then.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because I'll also, that's the beauty of creativity. You're writing a story about something happens to this character, and, they're in this sort of setting, and then it occurs to you that it would be really fantastic if another kind of another person arrived, or if something else took place. it's just sort of, you want to have that fun. That's the magic of it. And if you stick too closely to an outline, you're denying yourself that great pleasure.
Certainly are. Fantastic. So let's jump on to part 2 of the show, and we will learn all about that book that's sat behind you and behind me. But I want to know why there's 2 different covers there and what you like.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that now. Part 2, watch the story. Here we go. So, Kirsten, can you please let everybody know what The Change is all about?
So The Change is, it follows, sorry, I'm going to move just a little bit because I'm in the sun. There goes my computer.
Are you okay? Don't break things.
Sorry. It's you know, afternoon here and everything. The sun is beaming down on me. So The Change is about 3 women who reach a certain age, which is my age. I'm 49, and they've been told that this is a time in their life that's supposed to, you know, come with certain disadvantages. Like, you know, women are always told from an early age that there's a point at which you become invisible. And so they're expecting a certain kind of experience. And what they discover is that, that they have actually developed through their experience, through their, you know, the wisdom that they've accumulated, they've sort of developed these special powers. So there's Nessa, who her husband has passed away and her 2 daughters have gone off to college, and she realizes that things have gotten so quiet that she's able to hear the dead.
Yes.
And there is Jo, who's been at war with her body for about 30 years, and she has developed hot flashes that come with menopause or perimenopause. And she thinks this is the last straw. Like, I can't take this anymore. And then she realizes that she's able to channel all that rage and that energy and to do amazing things with it. And then there's Harriett, who is an advertising person, as I was, and she has lost her job. Her husband has left her, and she's disappeared into her beautiful modern home. And everyone assumes she's been eaten by cats, but instead she's been undergoing a metamorphosis of sorts. And one of the things that she's able to do is sort of control nature or make it do her bidding. And these 3 women join forces. Well, they meet each other, and they discover the body of a young girl who has been murdered and dumped on the side of a road. And they refuse to accept the official narrative of the girl's death, and they go in search of her killer. So it's a bit crazy.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun.
It does sound all of those things, and there's plenty of things and comments we can talk about this story that have been put on, say, reviews on Amazon. And what I want to say, first of all, the reviews that I've seen, people are leaving massive paragraph reviews for this book, and that is always a really good sign of absolute commitment from the reader. So how did you feel that this went down, and the feedback you received, how did you feel that was very different, or was it very different from the YA kind of work that you did?
I think it's very similar to my first book series, where a lot of my first book was published in 2006, and I still get emails from people who read that book in their early teens who said that it was their first feminist manual and that it helped turn them into the people that they would eventually become. And that's fantastic. I mean, there's nothing better than hearing that. And with this book, I wanted to get it into as many hands as possible. I wanted it to be a fun read and an entertaining read because I wanted everybody to read it. And I wanted to get a very, very simple message across, which is all of the stories that you've been told, women have been told about this stage in their life are wrong. They are. They may have applied in our grandmother's generation. They certainly do not apply to us now. And we need to rewrite that narrative. So it was a message that was incredibly important to me, in part because I'm living through all of that myself right now. And what really makes me happy is when I see reviews that indicate that I have actually done that, that I have made a difference in how somebody sees, this stage of life. And instead of, sitting back and, waiting for the moment that they become invisible, you're going to go out and kick some butt and make some change.
Amazing. It really is. It is incredible just to have feedback for your books in any stage is amazing. But to hear how it changes people's lives, it must be an incredible feeling and something to be very proud of. Anya in the comments has said, I love how these women use negative events as a means to harness their power for good. When you were writing that, was it did you kind of amuse yourself that you were using kind of natural superpowers to almost be like, I kind of want to describe it as like, not in a kind of wrong way, but like Scooby-Doo-esque kind of crime-solving team?
Yeah, I wanted to keep one foot. So with all of this stuff, I really tried to keep one foot very firmly planted in reality. I'm not, I think the book has been described in various ways by various, booksellers and organizations and whatnot as fantasy. It's not fantasy. It's it's magical realism, but it's heavy on the realism.
Yeah.
So the powers that they have, they're not crazy Marvel powers. They're things that you could actually imagine someone might develop. They're not too far out. They're not so outlandish that you can't suspend your disbelief. And in terms of the mystery that they solve, I don't know if I want to give everything away, but I mean, it's
no spoilers.
It's pretty much ripped from real life. Like a lot of the bad guys in this story are based on real life bad guys. And so that was something that was important to me, was making sure that everything felt really real, and that all of the situations in which these women find themselves are situations that were based either on my experience, the experience of somebody that I know very well, or on a scenario that has been in the news.
Yeah. I mean, when you mentioned that one of them was in advertising, kind of reflecting in kind of yourself in that character, do you use self-reflection or kind of your life experiences in your work a lot? And kind of, do you ever feel vulnerable by doing that, if that makes sense?
Yes, I'm a very secretive and introverted person by nature. It's really hard for me to tap into my personal experiences, but I do, and I feel like it I wouldn't say that you have to, but I do feel like when you are able to tap into something that makes you uncomfortable, you've found a source of power. There's something very potent there that you can use to help other people. And so I don't know if I've tapped everything. There's a lot of stuff in there I haven't ever told anybody about, but it's the advertising chapter in particular, was a lot of it was taken from my own experience, and they weren't terribly pleasant experiences either.
Yeah. Tough industry at times, I can imagine. So what I'd like to say about this book, currently on Amazon, there's 1,995 reviews on there. So 5 more reviews to 2,000. Come on, guys, get the book.
Can somebody do that for me, please?
It's going to stress me out. Get it up to 2,000. Come on. We'll look at some of those reviews, like I mentioned, very shortly. But let's talk about those covers, because for some reason, my small brain can never understand why books always get opposite kind of covers in different parts of the world. But there's 2 behind you. There's the orange one I've got here. I love this cover. But the change in the purple is also very different, but also very appealing. Did you have a preference to which one, and how much input did you kind of have on your cover design?
This is I bet other authors love answering this question. In my experience, authors have very, very little control. You might have veto power, like if there's something that's so horrible or hideous that you just refuse to promote it, then you might have a say. But ordinarily you don't have. They may tell you have a say, but you don't really have a say in the end. So that's one of the big shocks that I think everybody has when they come into this world. In terms of, I like them both. I really do. I have to say, when I first saw the British version, it was so striking. This was more in line with what I personally had in mind when I wrote the book. But I have had so many people tell me how much they love the purple cover. I think it's really just, it's subjective at a certain point.
Fantastic. Yeah, they're both striking and both very nice. So let's talk about the reviews that I mentioned earlier. And the one I said, just please don't do this. And the first one, believe me when I say this, the reviews are 99.9%.
You're not going to hurt. You're not going to bother me. Let's hear it.
No. 99.9% amazing, and they are certainly worth looking at. And I definitely meant it when they're paragraph-sized reviews. People love this book. But someone left a 2-star review. They said, I haven't read the book yet. First thing, if you haven't read the book, do not review it. But unfortunately, this back page is ripped, and the last few pages in the book are punctured. Do not review a book based on bad delivery, ruined physics of a book. That's not the author's fault.
Oh, you want to know the thing that really drives authors insane is when you have reviews of your book on Goodreads before it's even been out, when it's at a stage where nobody could have gotten their hands on it. Like, I've had people write reviews of books before I've even finished the manuscript.
How is that possible?
It's not, it's just somebody, either a mistake or somebody trolling, but that's like every author has that. And it makes your blood boil, because this is your baby. And it's like the first 3 reviews that go up on Goodreads are people who have clearly not read the book.
But this is what I'm saying. How can you, as a reader, think this is going to benefit anybody by leaving a 2-star review on a book that they haven't read? I do not understand it.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I don't mind those at all. I mean, it's that person,
Yeah, I mean, it could be worse. They could be 1-starring it, saying that the book is terrible. So it's not saying that at all. But let's get on to the other review. I'll have to read it because it was so big. I have to put it into sections, and I'll ask some questions off the back of this. This was definitely a 5-star review, like many others. It says, there is a lot I want to say about this book, but unlike the author, I am truly at a loss for words, and I don't think I could ever do a book like this justice. Personally, I believe that it should be added to the list of mandatory reading in all high schools around the world, so boys/men understand what we go through, and so girls/women would know what to look out for. On top of being a cautionary tale, it was also incredibly witty, charming, tear-jerking, witchy, and somehow managed to have romance even at the darkest of times. 100 out of 10. One of the best books I have ever read.
Yeah, I read that review. I did.
Have you seen that before?
I haven't. I try. I do. Where was it, on Amazon or on Goodreads?
That was an Amazon review. Yeah.
Yeah. It's in order to keep going.
Yeah.
So I think I'm writing my next book, which is in the same universe as this book. It's not a sequel, but it's in the same universe. And in order to keep going, I really have to protect myself from self-doubt and self-hatred more than anything else. So I avoid reviews, and that means that I don't often see a lot of good ones, but
there are plenty of good ones on there, believe me. But the questions I got off that. So first of all, as you mentioned earlier, kind of what the enjoyments you were getting from a lot of your books were, how it affected people. About kind of the message of the book actually delivers. And this actually clearly states that. And that adding it to a list of schools, I mean, that is an incredible statement that they believe that it's powerful enough to really affect how people see the way people develop in life. And I mean, does that kind of affirm kind of what you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. I mean, that's what I wanted. I didn't set out to write the great American novel. I set out to write a book that would change people's minds and make them see this time of life in a very different way. That's what I set out to do. And so that's when I hear, reviews like that, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. So it's incredibly gratifying. And I thank that person very much for saying such kind things.
Did you get the comment witchy? Did that make sense to you?
Yes. Well, yeah. Everybody in the book is witchy. I'm witchy.
So it said that it's incredibly witty, charming, tear-jerking, etc. Do you kind of write quite freely and think this is just how it should be, or have you learned, for example, the writing with Jason Segel, that you're putting witty in there on purpose, or is it, how structured do you kind of make that to get that effect?
I think it's an interesting question. I like to think of myself as a very funny person. There are people in my family who are funnier, and I resent them for that. My sister is incredibly funny. But in the writing process, sometimes the wit will come out as I am writing, but more often than not, it will come out when I'm editing.
Okay.
So I will often, I think of writing almost as painting, where you put down a background layer and then you add the figure and then you add the, second, it's just sort of this process of layers. And for me, those really wonderful details that make a book fantastic almost always come, I would say, on the third or fourth layer. And that often includes the humor. I mean, sometimes something will just be funny to me and I'll just, put in a private joke for myself, as I'm writing, but more often than not, it's in the editing process. And that may have something to do with the fact that I feel more relaxed during the editing process. My editing, not my editor's editing.
Yeah, I mean, for some people, they will really struggle to add comedy elements into their writing, and they might want to, but as someone who may be naturally funny or really kind of figured out ways to put that into their writing, do you have any advice for someone who might kind of want to go down that route?
Yeah, I would say give it. So funny is something, I mean, for me, funny is something that comes through when I'm feeling more relaxed and more confident. I feel more relaxed and more confident when I already have something down on the page. So if you think of it as, I think one of the biggest problems that people have, one of the stumbling blocks for a lot of writers, is they expect everything to be perfect on the first draft. Don't expect that. Get the basic plot, get the basic thrust of it down on paper, and then go back and add another layer and add another layer and another layer. And you'll find that at some point you're going to start to feel a lot more comfortable with the material, and things are going to suggest themselves to you. Little additions, little jokes, little things like that. And that's it. So it's often at one of the later stages that stuff, don't expect them to come in the first draft necessarily.
Brilliant.
So that's how I work.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, so we're going to go on to part 3 of the show, guys. Last 10 or so minutes. This is the chance for you to put some questions in the chat if you have any. I've got some staple questions I will be asking our guest. So feel free to send us some about writing, about life, anything. Send us a question, and if it's clean enough, I will put it on the screen. We will answer that together. So here's part 3 of the show. So then, Kirsten, I sent you some ahead of time earlier because
yes,
it's nice to give you a heads up on some of these questions.
I'm glad you did. They're tough ones too.
I know. I never used to send them out, which is surprising because people used to pull them off. Anyway, so the first one, if you could take the ending of anything, and we open this up to TV or film or literature, books, what ending would you change and why?
Okay, so I chose something that has been, it started as a book and it's been made as a as countless movies at this point. My favorite writer is Ira Levin. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
Yeah, a lot of people like, so you will know everything that he wrote, and yet people do not know his name. So he is the person who wrote Rosemary's Baby, The Stepford Wives, The Boys from Brazil, you know, and a number of others that you've heard of as well. He has done, and the reason that I love his work so much is because he has done more to influence culture, I think, than almost anyone else. You know, he has planted ideas in our minds that have, you know, that have remained just as potent for decades. But the one book that I would love to write a different ending to is The Stepford Wives. Like, I'm not going to say what, but let's just say I would like to see the ladies actually win that one.
Okay.
And so I would really love to see that changed. And I also, because I think, you know, there's been a lot of press about maybe Don't Worry, Darling, which is kind of, I believe, sort of a Stepford Wives homage in a lot of ways. I would love to see somebody take that idea and remake it for the modern world. Not writing the same book, not doing the same movie, but really setting it in the modern world and seeing how that works.
Well, if you ever run out of ideas, there's a project you can do there. Fantastic. That's a great answer. Okay. If you could hang out with any fictional character, or we can put it into your stories if you like, what character would you take from the world of fiction and what would you do with them?
So I would love to hang out with Rebecca from Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, because first of all, I think like she would be a lot of fun, but also because I suspect that the real story wasn't told. I think that the De Winters were up to something and that Rebecca got a bad rap. And so I would love to take her out and pick her brain and find out what really happened with all of that.
Nice. I like that. Okay. If you had to take the old classic book to a desert island, which means you could only have one book for the rest of your times and read that book over and over, what book would you take with you?
One of Michael Chabon's books. So I love him, as he's probably my favorite writer. I'm going to say The Mysteries of Pittsburgh, which was his first book. And that was a book that I grew up in a very small town. It was very hard to get my hands on that book when I was in high school. And I went to the ends of the earth to get that book.
Wow.
And I still love it. I think it had it was very inspirational for me in my own writing, even though I would never compare myself to him.
Okay, I've never read that one. I'll have to see if I can pick that up. Okay, Anya's got a question. Who is the awesomest badass golden girl?
Let's see. I love them all, honestly. I really, I'm going to say Sophia, the mother, because she was the one who, I think she made Dorothy. And I think she's kind of the leader of that gang in a lot of ways.
Great. Thank you for that question, Anya. Great question. Let's see what else we got. What was the last book or film that you read or watched?
The last book or film that I read or watched. Why am I drawing a blank on this? So what was the last book or film? Oh, the last film that I watched was... oh my God. I watched part of The Craft today with my 13-year-old daughter who's homesick from school. How's that?
That was a great movie.
I put it on for her. She wanted something to watch, and I was like, oh,
yeah.
Let's see if you share your mother's tastes and
that's certainly witchy
in fine film.
So. I mean, Halloween season is upon us now, almost.
Yeah, I do love. I can't remember his name, but oh God, I should know it. But the guy who did The Witch, Northman, The Lighthouse, his stuff is all amazing. I love it so much. And I also love the guy who did Hereditary and Midsommar, which I think are two of the best horror movies ever made.
I watched Northman recently and I loved it. the Lighthouse is something I always ask if people have seen, because it is absolutely amazingly bonkers. Yeah, it is incredible.
I recommend. This is another, like, when you get done with the drunk Goodreads scrolling.
Yeah.
You gotta do a little drunk Lighthouse watching.
Well, I watched that completely sober, and even that was insane.
That was the problem. You shouldn't have done that.
Well, it's just even the way it's directed and the way it looks is so different to anything else you'll see in modern cinema, and it's just absolutely incredible. Can't recommend that enough if you haven't seen that. So is there anything else Halloween-y that do you kind of hold the tradition? And I think in America it's a lot bigger than the UK, but...
we're big on Halloween here. Yes. So I was a huge, as my daughter was growing up, I was very into making the Halloween costumes. And I was very competitive. So I would do my very best to win Halloween every year, which is a real feat in Brooklyn, because we take Halloween very, very serious. If you come here on Halloween, like my neighborhood, I live in a neighborhood called Park Slope, it will be just filled with children, filled.
Wow.
And these kids can take a bag and fill it up with 5 pounds of candy within, 20 minutes.
Wow.
And so I used to make all of my daughter's costumes, and that was great. And so she said she wants to do trick-or-treating this year as well. So I have to come up with another idea.
Definitely. The fact that you said win Halloween is a mind-blowing concept to me, because there's no competitiveness here. I mean, we do the trick-or-treating, but it's really kind of small scale, I think.
Well, I think that you've won Halloween when other parents stop and ask your permission to take a picture of your kid. That's your costume.
I mean, for me, what I love about Halloween is just all the new shows that come out about kind of the horror elements and things like that, and the fact I can just binge watch horror films and all the good stuff. That my wife doesn't like horror stuff, so it's like it's my chance to shine. It's like, yes, I can watch all these things. But yes, it's a good time of year. Okay, is there anything on your bucket list that you haven't done that you would like to do?
There are a lot of places I would like to go that I haven't gone yet. And I felt really that obviously the pandemic put a stop to a lot of plans.
Yeah. And
so I feel like I've got this backlog of places that I really want to go, and I'm looking forward to getting out there. I would love to spend more time in South America in particular. I know a fair amount about the ancient cultures there and in Central America, and there's nothing I like more than going to a good Bruin.
Nice. Yeah, I like the historical kind of sites. Sounds fantastic. Okay, we'll wrap this up very, very shortly because we're at that time. But before we do, I'm going to ask the question, what does literary success look like for you? If you were looking back on your career down the line, what would you find satisfying and be successful for you in your eyes?
Well, I feel very, very, I feel like I've attained the success that I set out to have, which was very specific, which was, and this was somebody that I've known for many years would always say that that you're successful. It doesn't have anything to do with money. It's when you get paid to be who you are.
Nice.
And I get paid to be who I am. So if you want to throw a few $1 million at me, I'll definitely take them. But I feel like I've achieved what I set out to achieve, which is I am able to make a living being only the person that I am.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Amazing. So I'd like to say, before I say thank you and all that good stuff, where can people find the change and all of the other great things that you've done?
Well, I think you can find them pretty much anywhere at this point. I know there's some I think there's some distribution issues in the UK right now with certain stores, but it's not hard to find.
Yeah.
You can find it.
And it's on your website, is that right? And I was going to quote your website, but I've forgotten what it was.
Oh, my website, KirstenMillerBooks.com.
That's the one.
You can see all of the crazy young people stuff that I've written too. Some of it's pretty insane.
So please do go and check that out. And as I said, 5 reviews off 2000 on Amazon. Anya in the chat did say that she's got the book, so there's one in there. She will leave a review. I'm sure she does. She always leaves reviews on Twitter. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved your story, and some of the tips in there have been fantastic. I hope you've had a great time. And for me, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All of you in the chat, thank you. And of course, those of you in there that are joining me tomorrow on the Brooklyn Festival virtual show, I will see you then, and it will be very exciting. Those of you who are not joining me physically, please tune in and watch that. And of course, enjoy the weekend after that. And I hope you have a great time. And we will enjoy that show tomorrow. And please go in the description of the show on the podcast or the YouTube channel, and you'll find Kirsten's links, and I'll put them in there so you can just go to the website from there if you need to, if you can't remember. And that's it. Have a great time, and thank you from us. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.